Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us again today. We have another wonderful guest whose heritage of the 1950s and earlier will astound you. He's a rancher and he's well known throughout the United States for stewarding the land for Blackleg Ranch at McKenzie, North Dakota. But Jackie, before we get into visiting with our guest, would you introduce the program, please?
I will, and it'll be very short. First of all, viewers, look at the bottom. You'll see that www.wildthewindmillwatch.com. Please go to that, write it down, and then go to that site, and you'll see all sorts of things, information about the book that we've just written, the authors, the vendors, and this 1950s fun chat. So you'll want to check that out. Also, on the upper right-hand corner there by Jerry's face, you'll see the book. Wild the Windmill Watch, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. The book is the one that my sister and I wrote a few years ago. Okay, you see that little spot on the little white spot in the lower right-hand corner? That indicates that we in 2022 won the National Independent Press Award for the regional nonfiction category, and it was just called the Distinguished Favorite. So we're really glad about that. And I think it's about time to introduce Jerry. So
Yes.
this is Jerry Doan. He graduated from Bismarck High School in 1971, Bismarck State College in 1973, and then North Dakota State University in 1975. He owns and operates the Blackleg Ranch with his wife, Renee, and 3 sons, and their daughter and her family help out in the operation at times. So the ranch raises cattle, buffalo, and it operates Rolling Plains Adventures, a hunting outfitting business, Blackleg events, an agritourism operation, Blackleg Brewery, and Blackleg Ranch Meats. This man is an advocate for agriculture. So we welcome you, Jerry, to the 1950s Fun Chat.
You bet. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure.
It's been a challenge for you getting me here, as you well know, but I'm here.
We feel honored to have you here.
We're tenacious. And so let's get going. Now, you have a long, long heritage of ranching in your family. So give us the Cliff Note version, if you can, tell us about the heritage of this ranch.
Sure. Well, my great-grandfather was the original Doans came to America from England and landed on Plymouth Rock way back when. And then there was some storied history. Actually, if you read up on the Doan gang, I'm not sure it was all great, but anyway, they were a rebel group. And my grandfather ended up in Canada, and he was a Canadian citizen. In 1870, he came down to the United States, was in Kansas for a while, ended up in Michigan, and then I'm sure because of the Homestead Act and land in what was still then Dakota Territory, he ended up out here in Dakota Territory in 1880. 1882, he homesteaded in what we have here today. Lived in a sod house. We actually have a picture of the sod house. And, you know, when the world gets crazy and I start getting kind of bitter, I think back, man, you know, to be him and try to stay warm and keep food on the table in the northern plains, and yet was still a pretty western world. It couldn't be as bad as that. So I have a lot of admiration for that. And then he had a sickly daughter that had a lung disease, and so he moved to California for a better climate younger in his life. And then my grandfather took over, and my grandfather built a lot of what we started with. He bought land for $1 an acre when people said he was crazy, and he worked a couple of jobs off the ranch to make it all work. My brother tells the story how he actually had to tear down a fence on a quarter a couple different times, thought he was going to lose it, then found some dollars or made some dollars somewhere and paid the taxes and got it back. So that rich heritage, my dad then you know, one day my grandpa had a stroke. I'm not sure my dad was quite ready to take over because my grandpa hadn't prepared him very well. But one day my grandpa had a stroke and my dad had to, and he kept it all together, added to it. And kind of the day I came home from college, my dad saw a window of opportunity to get rid of the stress he didn't like very well. It wasn't a formal presentation, but it was basically, here, you take it.
Yeah. Yes.
And you've gathered many acres, and you've gathered, you're quite an or your family is an entrepreneuring family with all those businesses you've added to the ranch. So we noticed that you had raised buffalo. Now what, like bison or NDS? Right. But yeah. Okay. So do you have a market for them? Is there a market?
Yeah, we do. Well, just a tidbit of how we got into them. It was because we had hunters here and they wanted to do bison hunts or buffalo hunts. You know, the name, and I always go back to, there is no buffalo in the North American continent. They are bison, but my argument, did anybody tell the Indians that because they called them buffalo all those years? It was Buffalo Bill. It's the National Buffalo Association. And so I use both terms just so I can stir the pot and have somebody give me a heck.
Okay.
But anyway, we wanted to do hunts, and then because we had the meat label, there is a growing demand for the very lean bison meat, and it's a niche for that healthy protein. And so we got into it a few years ago. They're beautiful, they're majestic, they're fun, but they are challenging, and it creates some issues. My youngest boy, Jace, who is the cowboy of the family, he still rodeos, and he absolutely loves them. But last winter, which was a challenge on everything in North Dakota, was challenging for the buffalo as well. And it was challenging in that we had to feed them the whole time. They should have been out grazing, but our fences were all covered with snow because we had over 100 inches of snow here, that I'd get a phone call from South Dakota and they'd be there, and that wouldn't be fun. So, so we kept them locked up, which was irritating, but
yes.
All right.
How do they respond to the human touch, the human voice? Are they hard to tame, to humanize, you might say?
They are. I mean, they're wild. You know, they're not. I mean, you can have wild cows, but it's different. Buffalo are wild. We do have a pet one here because we had one last year, got trumped in the mud, and we saved them. And so we bottle fed him, and they won't take him back. They would kill him. And so we still have him. And for some of the events we do with tourism here, we bring him out. You know, he's up to my shoulder now. I'm always a little nervous. He's, he knows humans well, and he's tame, but he could knock you down now. But he's been good. But the one thing I will say about buffalo or bison compared to cattle, you have to, if you're moving them, apply a little pressure and back off, because if you get too carried away, they'll run either over you or around you, and they won't stop, and they'll take every fence down for 10, 20 miles. They get wound up. And so you have to, if you're used to cattle, and some people hoot and holler too much anyway, you will have a disaster. And so we learned, and we weren't that crazy, but we still learned a time or two when you're in a hurry and then you do something and then you go, well, we just messed this up. We might as well go home now.
Jerry, going back to your great-grandpa, your grandpa, your father, your sons, what is the personality trait that you can trace, if you can trace one genetically, to the Doan name?
Crazy.
Wow, I didn't expect that.
Crazy fun, maybe? Crazy fun?
Well, I think, I didn't know my great-grandfather. I knew my grandfather. I was fairly young, but he had fun. He lived life to the fullest. He used an airplane all the time. He had fun. People knew him. He would carry a box of Hershey bars or something like that in his vehicle all the time. And I remember as a little kid stopping, and maybe it was even I don't know if he ever stopped at your folks' place or not. I don't know. But I remember being at places he'd pull in, and he sold Handyman Jacks. I don't know if he ever actually got paid for one, but he'd have them in the back of the pickup or the trunk of the car and we'd pull. I remember pulling into It was actually Ryberg's, which lived just up there by a little west of McKenzie. You might know where that was. And nobody was home, so he left a Hershey bar on the tie of the corral and a jack standing by it. And it's funny because I was up there visiting with Ronnie Ryberg, the next generation, one day last summer, and I brought this up, and he went out. He had to go to the machine shed and show me that jack. And I was it brought, because I remember it. It was part of my granddad's heritage. It almost brought a tear to my eye. So it was cool kind of thing. So that that trait, I think I got some of that. My dad maybe a little. My dad was an only child, which is really strange for that era. And my mom only had one sister, and I only had one brother. So the Doan people were very small. I thought we were going to become extinct. Well, we had 4 kids, and now we have 12 grandkids. So I think we threw that away now a little bit.
Yeah, Yes. And why Blackleg Ranch? How did that name come about, and who named it?
Well, my grandfather. And I told him we had a big tour group here from across the country a couple of days ago, and I have to, because it is a disease. Blackleg is a cattle disease, as you well know, and that's not why. He brought the first Angus cows to southern North Dakota in 1930, predominantly Hereford country, and they hated those black cattle. They were wilder, and our cattle were really wild, because if you had an airplane 2 feet over your back most of your life, you'd be a little nervous. And so and me growing up, I remember people, they were those black-legged SOBs. And my grandfather, being the character he was, and because, I don't know, it was just, that's the way he was. And so he named it that. Now, when I was growing up, I'm like, I don't know if I like that. It's a disease, people. But now, as it's become quite well known with all the stuff we do, it's a great story, and we'll keep it. So
yeah.
And Jerry, how has ranching changed through the generations at Blackleg Ranch?
Well, we're I went to NDSU, but I went through. I'm old enough. I went through the 80s, and you guys get this. A lot of the guys I admire went broke, and our net worth was going south too. And I know if I would have been the generation to lose it, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. And so I went through holistic management, Alan Savory. We changed everything we do. We're a holistically managed operation. We believe in regenerative ag, which is, we use nature to our benefit. We rotate cattle all the time. We have our 2 main holistic goals are bring profitability back and improve our quality of life. Now, it doesn't mean everything's perfect here. I don't want to give the impression. First off, we're a family. I have 3 boys, and some days they want to kill each other. So it's just, families are challenging in that family dynamic. But we work hard on that. But so often we forget, we think, well, you just won't ever be profitable in farming and ranching. And I don't accept that. I think we can be, and we can still have fun doing it. My kids would have never came back to this ranch if I expected them to grow up like I did and do what I did. They have to have fun. They grew up with city kids. They have to have fun, take weekends off, do stuff. And you have to combine that. And too many people in agriculture complain about it instead of just trying to make that a priority. I always bring up the story, and I don't mean to take too much time on this, but it's important for the way I think.
Okay.
10 years difference between the older kids and Jace. And, I think I did a lot with the older kids, but not as much as I did when the good Lord blessed us with another child 10 years later. And Jace was into rodeo. And when he went to Montana State on a rodeo scholarship, I just said, I made it a priority. I'm going to go to his college rodeos. And people would say, how can you just leave that ranch? You have hay to cut, or you have this to do or that. And I said, there's always something to do here.
Yeah.
But I said, I don't care if they write on my tombstone that I was a rich guy or very successful, but it'd be really cool if they wrote he tried to be a good dad. Yeah. And, that went by so fast, but I'm so glad I did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have to in life make up your mind. I'm going to have this fun. You still work hard, you still do things, but if you don't make it a priority and you don't work hard to do that, you'll never have it. And then you'll always be growly. And I can do the best at being growly too.
Well,
Should we ask your wife about that?
Yeah.
no, but your attitude is on the right track, and you've kept it, and you've shown that to your children as well. And so you've done a good job already, even though your job isn't done, probably.
No. Yeah.
No.
I hope so.
No.
Yeah.
No. So tell us about, do you have a few short stories about wild cattle?
Yeah. Well, like I said before, we had really wild cattle. I remember sitting in used to be Missouri Slope Livestock Auction in Bismarck. Way back then, Jerry Bourne owned it, and he was a good friend of the family. And my grandfather got a kick out of it if he was sitting there. But I remember sitting there, and they're going to bring in these Doan cattle, these Blackleg Ranch cattle, and all of a sudden you can hear whooping and hollering. And all of a sudden, one of the ring guys comes running through and jumped right in the crowd. There's a cow right on his tail. Crowd laughing, and my grandfather, he's just sitting there laughing up a storm. He thought it was funny as heck. So he had this reputation of the wildest cattle in the country. He would he branded for years, and then he quit branding, and he would cut the lower quarter of each ear off on every cow, and that everybody knew that if there was a black cow and it was missing the bottom quarter of an ear, they knew it was J.W. Doan's cattle or Blackleg Ranch, and it became known. And so it was he carried a wide swath. I always think he was an entrepreneur before we knew what that word was. He did things, he took risks, but he had fun doing it. They told a story of how he'd walk clear to Sterling and go to a dance. I can't imagine walking to Sterling today just to go to a dance. But
is that 6 miles or so?
Yeah, at least 6-8 miles. So we're 6-7 from McKenzie, and so Sterling's a little farther, so it's probably 8 or 9, something like that.
Well, is that where he found his wife?
Well, no, actually, the railroad came through here in the little town of Britton, which is a ghost town on the ranch now. Lawrence Welk played dances there. The only thing left is the elevator still there, and it not being run, of course.
Yeah.
But my grandma, Julia, her brother worked for and I think it wasn't Sioux Line yet. I can't remember the name, Northwestern or whatever it was. Doesn't matter. She came out to visit him, and I always laugh. I said, yeah, Jewel Doan was sitting over here a few miles away and heard there's new chicks in town and jumped in the wagon or on the horse and went to Britton and met my grandmother. Or we wouldn't be doing this today, I guess.
I guess not. So that's Britton, North Dakota there was?
Yeah, Britton, North Dakota.
That's funny. There's a Britton, South Dakota.
Yeah.
Well,
it was only in its heyday 30 or 35 people there. And like a lot of towns, the Depression took it away.
Yeah.
There's some great stories, and it's hard to find much about it. But when the government was buying cattle in the Depression and they were paying, I don't remember, $2, $3, $5, whatever, people would haul their cattle there. They would shoot them, and people wanted to meet, and they wouldn't let them have them. And they drug them in those sand hills to the south. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
But it's the way some of those programs. Now, my grandfather would haul cattle there to go to market to Sioux City or Sioux Falls or St. Paul, and he'd ride the train with the cattle. And, it's too bad. I always wished I'd have found a diary somewhere that told more. And you guys know how this is. My dad lived 80, and he sat on the couch one day and he was gone. And he told me all those stories, but I can only remember part of them, because at that time it's not as big a deal to you. Now I'm like, how could I be so dumb that I didn't write those down?
Yeah.
That's very true.
And that's why it's so important what you guys are doing. I mean, it's fun that you're getting some of this recorded from some folks, and some of us can remember a few things yet.
Yeah.
Well, we hope that our guests cherish these recordings that we make, because it is a great way to pass on family history to the next generations, and not only just passing on the family history, but you actually get to see and hear the family member expressing all this knowledge about their heritage. It's
That's right. And the book is about the recent history, which is the 1950s history, because often you read about the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and then they skip over to the 60s. Anyway, so
Jerry, what talking about the 1950s? What can you recall as being very influential or impactful in your life in the 1950s?
Right. Well, and Renee was talking about, she had a tougher life than I did. I didn't grow up without running water and all those things. In fact, my grandfather had electricity before rural electric came in. And
how did that happen?
Well, him and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 maybe other farmers and ranchers south of McKenzie somehow got MDU to run a line from McKenzie south. I mean, I think back now and I'm like, how did they ever pull that off? So, and we were MDU when everybody else was Capital Electric for years. And it wasn't until I was just out of college, kind of half running this place, and MDU wanted to get rid of it. It was probably a headache for them, and Capital Electric wanted to buy it. And I said, I don't know if I want to get rid of it. It's a small line. When we go out of power, MDU comes right here, bang. And I didn't have a choice in the matter, but I had to give them a little grief anyway. And so it was pretty interesting. Before that, they had one of those 32-volt wind generators. They were, like I said, they were innovators. And there was a tunnel between the house and a shop and the shop. My grandfather, he would play games on salesmen. They'd knock on the door and he'd say, hi. And then he'd say, just a minute. And then he'd run down and go through the tunnel, come up to the shop and say, hey, what are you doing over there? I'm over here. There's just lots of stories like that. And you had fun. But, to even have a tunnel and do those sorts of things. Yeah. And between that, the shop then and the house, there was an ice house back when and they would go to the Missouri River, fill that ice house. And so they had refrigeration before a lot of people. They were a little ahead of their time, I think. So pretty exciting. And so, that was a little bit ahead of me. My brother, who was 7.5 years older, he remembers a lot of those things. And I was the spoiled one because I was the baby, of course. And he didn't appreciate me most of the time. But I come along, and of course, I remember the black and white TV and the rabbit ears. And I remember, we had a 55 Dodge station wagon when we'd go on trips. I would play in the back. Nobody was buckled in those days, and I'd have all my little tractors and trucks back there. And I mean, those are great memories. And I loved baseball. I grew up and this is different than most kids. I never went to country school. My brother went to first grade to Logan Township School, which was 2 miles north here. And those bad winters, my dad had to get up, plow the road with the bulldozer, a cat, no cap on it or anything, and then go home, he had a Jeep, and he'd drive him to school. And then, if the road drifted in, he'd have to plow it again, get the Jeep. And they did that 1 year, and my dad said, I'm not doing that. And they went to town and bought a house. And we moved to town every winter, and we went to Bismarck Public School. So I went to Pioneer Grade School.
Oh, okay.
So, you had the benefit of that. But the one thing I did miss is I never knew the people that lived around us very well until I went to high school or whatever, when you were back together in school again, So it had its good and its bad, like everything. But I absolutely loved baseball. So we lived on 11th Street, which was just at that time was the far north point of Bismarck, other than the Capitol. And when I was in town, I played on the Capitol grounds all the time. We played Cowboys and Indians on the Capitol grounds. That was the thing. It's not politically correct these days, but God, we grew up with those kind of movies, Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and all those cowboy shows. And God, I just loved it. And so we played all that. And then we didn't have these organized, league teams or anything. There was a bunch of kids get together, and I loved baseball. I played it every time I could. And my dad sent, this was probably not in the 50s, but early 60s, couldn't have been very long. But he sent my mom and I to Minneapolis to see a Twins game. And it was a big deal, back in those days, it was a prop plane out of Bismarck. You stopped in Jamestown, Fargo. The pilot, as a little kid, brought you up to the cockpit, gave you a set of wings. God, I was heaven, just absolute heaven. Got to watch Harmon Killebrew play. And I just absolutely loved it. And the sad part, though, and that's why I wasn't that way. My dad didn't go along. There was work to do. And that's a shame. And I wasn't going to be like that. So, because he didn't go to a lot of my stuff because there was work to do. It's the way it was, but I didn't want to be like that. Because I felt I missed that.
Yeah. Parental support is very important to a child, no matter what the age. Sorry.
Do you have aspirations to be a major league player?
Well, I'm sure, but I lived and breathed baseball, at that time, and it's too bad, there wasn't more, kids today have it made with the organizations and things. But, what was good about our era was we got to do a lot of things. Now if you want to be a baseball player, you're going to go on a traveling team and they won't want you to do anything else, because if you're any good, they want you to be just baseball. And that's okay, but you don't get to experience, all the things we got to do. It was more fun, I think. And
did your children like to play baseball too?
Yeah, Jace played, and I loved watching. The other two, I don't think played very much. They were my middle son was a big athlete, football, track, wrestling, all that. Jeremy did some sports, soccer, track. I don't think he ever played baseball, though. They're all different. Each one of the kids have these similarities, but yet they're different, which makes it
different. Well, why did your younger son get into rodeo?
Well, his sister Shanda was Miss Rodeo North Dakota, third runner-up to Miss Rodeo America. She did a lot of rodeo and stuff. We traveled around. She went to the University of Wyoming, was on their rodeo team. Her husband was a big calf roper. And so Jace grew up in that. And we were really active. Again, people always ask me, how come you didn't rodeo a bunch? I said, I spent my whole younger life in a hayfield. That's what I did all summer long. And we had several hired men, and I'm not complaining. It was fun. You had these guys and it was fun. You had camaraderie. And I remember we had one kid working here, and he was quite a singer and play the organ, and we'd play old songs. He'd play old songs and we'd all sing along. It was fun. But I never got that opportunity. My dad never pushed me to do those sorts of things. Or, I had a little horse called Bugs who was a little pony, and he'd buck you off and kick you in the side of the head, and he'd run away 5-6 miles, and my dad would go get the airplane and go find him. And, but as we got older, Renee grew up on a horse, as she told you guys, and we did a lot of riding and a lot of things with horses, and we founded the End of the Trail Saddle Club. So we did a lot of play day stuff, on the edge of rodeo, but it was more fun events, scoop shovel racing and all those things that probably nobody thinks are too kosher these days. But Jace got to grow up in that. And then as he got a little older, you had all these youth rodeos, and we ran the 4-H rodeo in Burley County for 17 years. And it was a lot of work, and we hauled all the equipment and did it all. He grew up in that whole era, and he was champion of this, champion of that. And then he got into junior high rodeo. And when it just started, he was in the inaugural, made it to the nationals, got into high school rodeo, made it to the nationals, was on the rodeo scholarship at Montana. And then, he won the NDRA finals last year. He's been to the circuit finals and the pro rodeos twice, and it's something that it's not something you do your whole life, but you got to have some fun when you're young. He always gosh, Dad, I don't know. I'm taking too much time off. And I said, well, there's a time to do it and a time not to. And only you can decide. And I'll support you however long you want to do it, you know. So
Good.
Do you think he'll come back to the ranch?
oh yeah, he's back full time. It's just he's rodeoing on the side. You know, they have twins and a 2-year-old, so their lifestyle's a little crazy. So
Yes.
but he
Yes.
lives on the south part of our ranch, and he's the cowboy. He loves, and he actually runs the cows and the buffalo, and his wife runs the meat business. My oldest boy runs the hunting operation. My middle son runs the brewery and the agritourism. I mean, they all work together. It's an operation, but they're all responsible for their own entity, and that seems to work out. I mean, we, like I said earlier, we're a family. It isn't perfect, but you know, we work at that every day. So,
So Jerry, what's in store for you as you gradually move into your next season of life?
that's a good question.
No answer.
We were talking as before we came on the air here. I just can't totally retire. I will go nuts. I've got friends. Some people can, and God bless them if they're prepared and they have things to do. I don't golf, and I don't know if I want to learn. I mean, I have a couple times, but I suck at it, and I don't know if I really want to learn to get good. But we want to slow down. We want to travel more. Renee's still working as the majority leader's administrative assistant. She loves the job. I don't know. I don't want to think I have veto power to say you can't work anymore. You know that. So on the off years we travel. You know, and as you guys know, I speak around the country quite a bit because I am an advocate for agriculture, and I talk a lot about bringing the kids back and how do you make that work and all that. I love that. And it lets us get away, and, you know, maybe we take a day or two extra as we go off. I want to do more of that. The boys want me to become more of an advisor. That's what I want to be. And I want to help and contribute, but I don't want to, you know, I've PG'd all our cows and a lot of other people's for years. Thousands and thousands, and my shoulder shows it, you know.
I bet.
But I still did it this year, and I'm like, because Jace thinks I'm still 45. You forget. Jump the fence.
You preg check your female bison?
I haven't yet. No, we don't have a facility to do it good. I would, as long as we can hold them good. I don't want to get run over by buffalo.
So how many bison, how many herd in your bison herd?
Well, we've got a few hundred heads, so we've got quite a few. So
okay, so then do you, to prevent you from getting too many for your acreage that they can graze on, do you sell them to a meat packer or something?
Yeah, we do. And you know, we've been building the herd, so we have our own meat label. Everything that goes through our meat label is grass finished. It's we're after the health niche, and so it's but we do grow some bison and put them in a feedlot, either our own or we've custom fed some, and then they go through, you know, there's a North American bison plant in New Rockford, there's one in Brush, Colorado, and we'll sell them through that. You know, we'll see how this all goes. The hunts are really good, but you can't hunt them all. You know, we've had lots of people, and they usually hunt in the winter because they want a trophy hanging on the wall and they want the hair on them. And it's been fun because you meet a lot of people. The whole hunting operation we do, you meet really good people, and it's pretty much being in the entertainment business. You know, the beer better be cold, the food better be good. Hunting's just all a part of it, you know. But it's fun, and it's another stacked enterprise that relates to agriculture and is able to bring these kids back. And the same way, agritourism is our way of being able to tell the story, the positive side of agriculture to lots of people. Now, we do weddings and stuff. How do you fit that in? But any way we can, and maybe it's just a conversation with a few people about what we do and why it's important and why, you know, America's never been hungry. And so it's pretty easy to forget food is important and that the farmers and the ranchers are important. And as we get, even in North Dakota, and you guys grew up here, we're one of maybe the most rural state there is, and yet very few people understand agriculture anymore or give a rip. They think it all comes from Walmart or Super Value or wherever. And
Yeah.
so, our whole goal is to tell that story, however we do it, spread that word. So that part's fun for me, and I love doing that. So
Good. Jerry, tell us about what Christmas was like on the ranch when you were young.
well, it was we didn't have a huge family, and so it was probably different than Renee's family with lots of brothers and sisters, but it was always fun. We always opened presents on Christmas Eve, never on Christmas Day. And as I was young, we went to Trinity Lutheran Church in Bismarck. Still do. It's multi-generational. And Renee told you her story. We're a mixed.
Yeah.
We got a strong Catholic and a strong Lutheran together. So look out. So, but she has very strong tradition in the Church of Minokan. I had very strong tradition in the Lutheran Church in Bismarck.
Yeah.
Several generations have went there, and so growing up, and churches have changed. That church was massive and packed, and it's not that way anymore. Unfortunately, it's different, and people don't go, and of course the town is spread out, and they built new churches on where the new people are, but it was a lot of fun. I remember back, my brother was big in the choir, I wasn't, and the way they marched in and those big old Lutheran hymns and that big pipe organ blaring, it brought goosebumps. And every once in a while we go there and they'll bring some of that back, and it gives me goosebumps because I remember that. And it's that part's fun, and so that all surrounded Christmas. You always got some. My mom always told the story. She was a bad girl when she was little, and she got it's not even politically correct, so I probably won't say. It was a black doll. I won't use the titles they used back then.
Yeah.
A black little rag doll and a potato and a carrot. That's what she got because her mom and dad said she hadn't been good. And and that's all she got for Christmas. And she never forgot it. And she always reminded us,
that would scar a little girl.
Well, and maybe, but it was, I don't think it scarred her. She just knew how tough it could be. They grew up in some hard times too. And she had some really good stories, some pretty gruesome of things that went on, in life and things. And she told them. The one thing I'd like to say about my mom, because you grow up on a ranch like this, and my mom always waved at me when I went by the window. And that lot, it's the Grand Lodge here now. They don't live there, but I still look at that window when I go through the yard. Because my mom was, and you guys know Leave It to Beaver, the show. Mm-hmm. My mom was Mrs. Beaver's mom.
Cleaver. Mrs. Cleaver.
Mrs. Cleaver, yeah. She always saw the June Cleaver. She always saw the good in everybody, always was upbeat. So if I was down and out, I'd go in there and my mom would have me smiling in, 15 minutes. I miss that every day of my life because she was just that way. And and she had to put up my dad, who was a little owly once in a while.
Little owly.
But yet had his good side too. But it's, and so all of that, and mom was, a big baker, and my grandma, and the ranch was, we had these meals with hired men, and there was a lot of people around the table, and there'd be neighbors stop by all the time. That doesn't happen anymore, unfortunately. Or even the road grader guy would pull in and spend a whole hour, sitting,
Yeah.
And if you were in the field, somebody brought lunch. My mom and grandma would bring lunch out, and it'd probably be fresh baked donuts and a fruit jar full of Kool-Aid, and or a piece of banana cream pie or pumpkin pie, or it was fun, and the meals were great, and the camaraderie. We don't have that in this country anymore like that. Very, very seldom, I think. that was a lot of fun. And you just, I don't know, that part with growing up was great.
Mm-hmm. And what I hear with you, and we've heard a lot from other people, that freedom was the word for children. They had a lot of freedom. They have responsibility, chores, but that freedom to just be kids.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it was, and I was thinking about this. I was driving when I couldn't see over the steering wheel. I think I was 6 years old. And I talk about that. They would send me, and I might not have been 6, but I couldn't have been much over 8. Send me to McKenzie with a load of grain on a truck that doesn't have power steering and the brakes hardly work.
Oh my goodness.
But nobody seemed to worry about you. But you were already checking oil. I was in charge of when we were harvesting. I was in charge of the trucks. I checked all the oil. I greased every truck. I blew out the air filter. I loved that. I just absolutely loved it. And my grandfather taught me how to weld. And so I was a little mechanic type, and driving all over and raking hay. I mean, I couldn't do everything, but nobody worried about you like that. It was now, I get it. Some of that was half dangerers, but we put a muzzle around everybody nowadays, and I'm not sure if it's all good or not, but.
Yeah. Jerry, we're nearing the end of our broadcast. This has been so much fun to visit with you. But I always like to ask a couple of last questions, but I'm going to ask one in particular. What from the 1950s has been the most influential in your life as an adult?
Well, I think as we've watched the world change, I think the most influential thing that I think we're missing is the World War II generation. And, I was old enough to go to Vietnam, didn't go. I was in the lottery and didn't get picked. Thank God, because that was a war that wasn't really, people weren't behind it, and it was kind of a mess. Mm-hmm. But the World War II folks, and my dad didn't serve. There was some in our family that did, but everybody supported it. Everybody did things. Everybody was a patriot. I think our country needs that so bad right now that it's part of our problem, and those people are gone. And I think it really had an influence on me. We're a very patriotic family because we're a rodeo family. When you go to a rodeo, your hat's going to be over your heart. You're going to say a prayer. We don't, and as much as I love baseball, I barely watch it because I'm so disappointed when people kneel for the national anthem. I don't, protest is fine, but that's not the place. And it tears me apart. Jace and I were both huge Twin fans, but when we watched one game and they knelt, I haven't watched the game since. And I don't mean to get political, but we need patriotism in this country. People gave up everything they had so you and I can have this conversation today. And are forgetting that, and we need to remind kids of it, or else we're going to lose it before we're done, and that would be such a shame. And I know your family that grew up on a farm had those same values, and I'm sure you guys do, but a lot of people don't, unfortunately. So that's, I think, the biggest influence on me, and I'll be a strong patriot, even though I didn't serve, but we need to be.
Yes. Jerry Doan, McKenzie, North Dakota. Thank you so much for chatting with us. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
sorry it took so long.
we got it. Like Jackie said, we're tenacious.
Yeah, so for our viewers, please click on that red subscribe button and then the blue thumbs up button, and tell your friends, even your family, about this 1950s fun chat. So until next time, toodaloo.
Yep. Bye-bye.